The first car that pulled up outside Supermart was black, long, and unhurried. The kind of vehicle that did not need to announce itself because everything about it was already an announcement. The second car arrived 40 seconds later. The third came from the opposite direction entirely, as though the street had been measured in advance and the approach angles calculated by someone who thought in formations rather than parking spaces. Tae-won watched all three from the customer service counter through the front glass with the focused stillness of a man whose body had decided that panic was no longer a productive option and had moved directly into something colder and more operational. His pocket square was still winter sky blue. His three-piece charcoal suit had not acquired a single crease. He had learned over 11 years of managing impossible situations for impossible people that elegance under pressure was not vanity, it was armor. The moment you looked undone, everyone around you felt permission to come undone with you. He could not afford that today. Yui. He reached for the walkie-talkie without looking away from the glass. Tell me you are still at your post. The response came immediately, crisp and unhesitating. 3 black vehicles. Street level. The first has diplomatic plates. The second does not have any plates at all. The third. A brief pause, the sound of small careful movement. The third has a flag on the bonnet. It is very small. I cannot identify it from here. Tae-won's hand tightened on the walkie-talkie. Where is Mercy? Still in the car park with His Highness. Another pause. She has reorganized the council into 2 rows. She says a single semicircle is inadequate for what is coming. What does she think is coming? Yui's response was delivered with the undecorated honesty that made her the most valuable 7-year-old in the building. She says she does not know exactly, but she says whatever it is, it will need more seats. Tae-won set the walkie-talkie down, picked it up again, set it down a second time. Through the front glass, the door of the first vehicle opened. The woman who stepped out wore a coat the color of deep plum, structured floor length, with a high mandarin collar and gold buttons running from throat to hem in a single military line. Her hair was pulled back with the severity of someone who had decided, long ago, that beauty was not the point. Her shoes were pointed, black, and struck the pavement with a precision that suggested every step she had ever taken had been intentional. She was not the woman from the day before, the one Mercy had clocked near the freezer section with the expensive shoes and the empty basket. She was considerably more senior than that woman. She stood beside the car and looked at the Supermart facade with the expression of someone reading a document they had been expecting, and were not pleased to finally have in front of them. Behind her, 2 aides in matching charcoal uniforms stepped out and arranged themselves at her shoulders like punctuation. Inside, at the fish counter, Dowager Seo Hairan watched the woman emerge from the vehicle and felt something move through her that was not fear and was not surprise and was not quite relief. It was the specific sensation of a thing you have been waiting for arriving exactly as you always knew it would. Not comforting but clarifying. She recognized the woman. Of course she did. She opened her ivory fan, painted cranes catching the supermarket light along each panel, and fanned herself once. Slowly. Then she straightened the pearl at her left ear, smoothed the front of her dove-gray silk blouse, and stepped out from behind the fish counter for the first time since she had been stationed there 4 months ago. Her posture as she walked toward the front of the store was the posture of a woman returning to something, not arriving at it. In the car park, Mercy had not looked toward the street once. She was focused entirely on the matter immediately before her, which was the reorganization of 12 children into a formation she considered strategically sound for receiving visitors of unknown intention. Min-sol's mustard blazer caught the late morning sun as he moved at her direction, blue notebook open, pen working steadily. The girl in the green pinafore with brass buttons had finished her rice cracker and was now standing with her hands clasped behind her back, which Mercy had noted with approval without saying so aloud. Kongdae had positioned himself nearest the door that led back into Supermart, which Mercy recognized as his way of managing his own nerves while maintaining the appearance of utility. You are guarding the exit, she told him. I am, he agreed, with more dignity than the statement required. Good. She let him have it. Jun-hyuk stood at the center of everything, the handmade crown of gold ribbon and dried sunflowers sitting on his head with a naturalness that had surprised even him when he stopped thinking about it. His sage green uniform had been straightened. Mercy had done it without asking, reaching up to press the collar flat with both hands while continuing a separate conversation with Min-sol, the way a person tends to something they consider their responsibility without making a ceremony of it. He was watching her now. The way she moved through the car park, directing, adjusting, anticipating, with her amber dress catching the morning light and her gold-clasped braids holding perfectly. Mercy. His voice was quiet enough that only she would hear it. She turned. They are here, aren't they? It was not a question. She looked at him for a moment with those steady eyes that held things without spilling them. Yes. From the palace? I think so. She tilted her head slightly. Are you ready? Jun-hyuk considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. For months ago, the answer would have been assembled from layers of protocol and preparation and the careful architecture of royal composure. Today the answer came from somewhere simpler and considerably more honest. I do not know, he said. Mercy nodded. That is the right answer. She turned back to the council. Min-sol, close the notebook. Min-sol looked up. I have 3 items still unrecorded. Close it. The notebook closed. Everyone listen. Mercy's voice carried across the car park with a clarity that had no business coming from an 8-year-old in white lace socks. Every child stilled. Even Kangdae stopped shifting his weight near the door. People are coming who are going to try to make decisions about our king without asking him anything. That is what powerful people do when they are frightened. They decide instead of asking. She paused. We are not going to let that happen. Silence. Then the girl in the green pinafore raised her hand. Yes, Mercy said. What do we do if they try to take him? The car park went very quiet. The question sat in the air between all of them, solid and real. The way children's questions always are because children have not yet learned to dress difficult things in softer language. Jun-hyuk looked at the girl. She was perhaps 7 years old, brass buttons on her pinafore catching the light, face open and waiting for an answer she fully intended to act upon. Something in his chest pulled tight and then released. Nobody, he said, stepping forward so that every face in the formation could find his, is taking me anywhere I do not choose to go. He said it with a quietness that was not uncertainty. It was the opposite of uncertainty. Not today. Mercy looked at him sideways. He looked back at her. Not today, she repeated, and the way she said it made it sound like a foundation being laid. Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning. Kwon Dae-sung met the woman in the plum coat at the entrance of Supermart before she reached the automatic doors. He had positioned himself there with 4 minutes to spare, enough time to button the second button of his double-breasted charcoal suit, adjust both cufflinks, and assume the particular stillness that told everyone in his organization that whatever was happening had been anticipated and was being managed. The burgundy silk of his tie caught the morning light as he stepped forward. The woman in the plum coat stopped. They regarded each other for a moment with the specific wariness of 2 people who have known each other long enough to have stopped being surprised by the other's capacity for disruption. Director Shin. His voice was even. A flat, navigable surface with considerable depth beneath it. Kwon Dae-sung. Her voice was cooler, more deliberate. She looked at the building behind him, then back at his face. You have been hiding a crown prince in a grocery store. I have been protecting a crown prince in a legitimate commercial establishment. The photograph has reached the council. I am aware. It has also reached 3 foreign embassies. She let that settle. And a rather enthusiastic journalist in Seoul, who has already filed an inquiry with the Palace Communications Office. Kwon Dae-sung's expression did not shift. His left hand, hidden at his side, closed once and opened again. What does the council want? Director Shin looked at him with the patience of a woman who had delivered unwelcome information to powerful men for 30 years, and had learned that the pause before the answer was where everything real happened. The council wants the boy presented. Formally. Within 72 hours. Inside the store, 3 meters behind Kwon Dae-sung and completely invisible against the shelving of aisle 1, Cho Yui stood with her borrowed phone, yellow dress with navy collar perfectly pressed, recording every word with the focused calm of a child who understood that intelligence was only valuable if it was delivered accurately. She had been there for 4 minutes before either adult noticed. Which is to say, neither adult noticed. Im Tae-won found the dowager in the cosmetics aisle. She had stopped there on her way to the front of the store, standing before a display of face creams with the ivory fan held loosely at her side. Her dove-gray silk blouse and pearl earrings entirely at odds with the fluorescent lighting and the discount signage above her head. She was not looking at the face creams. They want him presented, Im Tae-won said quietly, falling into step beside her without preamble because they were past preamble. 72 hours. I know. She had not turned to look at him. Director Shin is outside with Dae-sung. I know that too. Im Tae-won straightened his pocket square. It did not need straightening. What do we do? Dowager Seo Hyran turned from the display then. In the full fluorescent light of the cosmetics aisle, with no fish counter between her and the world, she was a woman of 61 who had survived the collapse of a dynasty, for months behind a glass display of mackerel, and the quiet daily indignity of watching her grandson stock shelves under a name that was not his. Her expression was the expression of a woman who had been patient long enough. We, she said, with a precision that made the word feel like the first note of something larger, do exactly what they least expect. She opened the ivory fan. We say yes. Im Tae-won stared at her. We say yes. Immediately. Without negotiation. She fanned herself once, the painted cranes moving in the recycled air of the cosmetics aisle. When powerful people expect resistance and find agreement instead, they spend the next 48 hours looking for the trap. She closed the fan with a single clean snap. And while they are looking for the trap, we build one. Im Tae-won was quiet for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 4 months, the corner of his mouth moved in a direction that was not distress. You have been planning this, he said. Not an accusation. Something closer to admiration. I have been standing behind a fish counter for 4 months, Tae-won. She turned toward the front of the store, her stride carrying the full authority of every room she had ever entered first. Did you think I was simply counting mackerel? In the car park, Mercy was briefing the council on what she called the protocol of dignity, a set of principles she had composed apparently between the crown braiding and the Tuesday morning in question, which suggested a level of forward planning that was either extraordinary or faintly alarming, depending on how old you were. Rule 1, she said, standing before the 2 rows of children with her hands clasped behind her back. Nobody speaks first. We let them come to us. What if they do not come to us? Min-sol asked. His mustard blazer had a small badge on the lapel today, a gold star self-adhesive, which he wore with the unironic seriousness of a medal. They will come to us. Mercy was certain. People always come to the thing they cannot control. Kangdae raised his hand from his position near the door. Are we the thing they cannot control? Yes, Mercy and Junhyuk said simultaneously. They looked at each other. Junhyuk almost smiled again. The real one. The one that had nothing diplomatic in it. Rule 2, Mercy continued, her amber dress perfectly still in the car park air. Gold clasps catching light with every small movement of her head. Whatever they offer, His Highness does not answer immediately. He considers. Even if he already knows the answer. She looked at Junhyuk directly. Especially if he already knows the answer. Why? Yui had materialized from somewhere, yellow dress pristine, and was now seated in the front row with her phone screen dark and her full attention forward. Because a person who answers immediately tells you everything they want. A person who considers tells you nothing, except that they are not afraid of silence. Mercy paused. And silence is the most powerful thing in any room. The car park held the truth of that for a moment. Then the door from the supermarket opened, and Im Tae-won stepped through it in his charcoal 3-piece suit and winter sky pocket square, his expression carrying something new, not his usual orchestrated composure, but something quieter and more resolved beneath it. Behind him, her dove-gray silk catching the full outdoor light for the first time, the ivory fan open at her side, came Dowager Seo Hyran. She stepped into the car park and found her grandson immediately across the distance between them. He found her at the same moment. For months of fish counters and wrong names and compressed posture and careful invisibility sat in the air between them. Junhyuk straightened. Fully. Completely. The crown on his head caught the morning sun along every braided ribbon edge. The dowager's expression moved. Just slightly. Just enough. She opened her fan fully, all crane panels spread, and inclined her head toward him. Not a bow. A recognition. Mercy, standing one step to his left, watched this exchange with the stillness of someone who understands they are witnessing something that belongs entirely to 2 other people, and must not be touched. Then she looked forward, squared her small shoulders inside her amber dress, and waited for whatever was coming through that door next. Director Shin walked through the supermarket car park with the measured confidence of someone who had entered more difficult rooms than this, and had left all of them having gotten what she came for. She stopped when she saw the children. Not a dramatic stop, a recalibration. The kind that happens in the space between one step and the next when something appears that was not in the briefing document. Her two aides in matching charcoal uniforms halted behind her with the trained precision of people paid to mirror their superiors' decisions without questioning them. She looked at the 2 rows of children seated on the concrete boundary wall. She looked at the boy in the sage green uniform wearing a crown of gold ribbon and dried sunflowers. She looked at the small black girl in the amber dress standing one step to his left with her hands clasped behind her back, and an expression that suggested she had been expecting this visit, and had allocated it exactly the time it deserved. Then she looked at Kwon Dae-sung, who had appeared at the car park entrance behind her, double-breasted charcoal suit immaculate, burgundy tie straight, cufflinks catching the afternoon light, his face carrying the particular blankness of a man who knows more than he is showing and has decided that showing nothing is currently his strongest position. "You did not mention the children," Director Shin said to him. "You did not ask about the children," Kwon Dae-sung replied. Director Shin returned her attention to the formation before her. Her plum coat caught a breath of wind and settled again. She addressed Jun-hyuk directly, bypassing every adult in the vicinity with the efficiency of someone who had not traveled this distance to speak to intermediaries. "Your Highness." Her voice was formal but not unkind. "I represent the Royal Restoration Council. We have been searching for you." Jun-hyuk said nothing. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Mercy did not move. Director Shin's left eyebrow shifted by approximately 2 millimeters, the only indication that the silence had registered. "The council has authorized a formal presentation. You would be returned to." "Where?" Jun-hyuk said. "One word. Quiet and complete." Director Shin paused. "I beg your pardon? Where would I be returned to?" Not a question. A requirement for specificity. The director's 2 aides exchanged a glance behind her that they immediately cancelled. "To the capital. To the residence prepared by the council for the House of CEOs. Which members of the council authorized this?" Jun-hyuk's voice had not risen. It had done something more unsettling. It had deepened. Not in pitch but in weight. Director Shin studied him with an expression that was recalibrating again. Faster this time. She had been briefed on a boy who had spent 4 months restocking groceries in a sage green uniform. She had not been briefed on this. "All 7 members," she said carefully. "Unanimously." A beat. Fractionally too long. The vote was 6-1. Who dissented? Behind Director Shin, Kwon Dae-sung's expression remained blank. But his right hand at his side was very still in the way that hands are still when the person they belong to is paying extremely close attention. Im Tae-won, standing beside the dowager at the car park entrance, had stopped breathing in any noticeable way. Director Shin straightened the already straight front of her plum coat. Councilman Yeo abstained. "Dissented," Jun-hyuk corrected. "An abstention in a motion of this nature is a dissent. You know that." The car park was profoundly quiet. Min-sol's pen had been hovering over his blue notebook for 30 seconds. He had not written a single word because he was too busy staring with the open admiration of someone watching a person do something he had previously considered impossible. Mercy's eyes were forward. Her face was still. But in the very center of her chest something was blazing. Director Shin recovered with the practiced ease of a woman who had not reached her position by losing her footing in front of an audience. She produced a document from inside her plum coat, folded, official, sealed at the corner with a stamp that Kwon Dae-sung recognized from 15 meters away, and which made the muscle in his jaw move once. "The formal summons," she said, extending it toward Jun-hyuk. "Signed and sealed. 72 hours from this morning." Jun-hyuk looked at the document without taking it. Then he looked at Mercy. Mercy looked at the document. Then at Director Shin. Then at the document again. Her expression was the expression of an 8-year-old who is thinking several moves ahead and does not want anyone to see exactly how many. "His Highness will review the document," she said. "With his counsel." Director Shin blinked. "His counsel. His counsel." Mercy indicated the 2 rows of children on the boundary wall with a gesture so composed it should not have been possible from someone in white lace socks. "We will send a response within the hour." The silence that followed was the most expensive silence Im Tae-won had ever stood inside. Director Shin looked at the children. She looked at Mercy. She looked at Kwon Dae-sung with an expression that asked a very direct question without using any words. Kwon Dae-sung's face answered nothing. The director looked back at Mercy. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a kind of recognition, involuntary and genuine, that happens when a person encounters something they were not prepared for and cannot immediately categorize. She placed the document on the boundary wall beside Min-sol, who received it with both hands and the gravity of a court clerk. 1 hour, Director Shin said. That is what I said, Mercy confirmed. Director Shin turned and walked back toward the supermarket entrance, her aides reforming behind her with the synchronized movement of well-trained shadows, her plum coat carrying her exit with the dignity it had carried her entrance. The moment she was through the door, Kang-dae exhaled so completely that 3 children beside him turned to look. I forgot to breathe, he explained with great sincerity. We noticed, Min-sol said. Dowager Seo Hairan walked across the car park toward her grandson with the unhurried certainty of a woman who had been moving toward this moment for 4 months and intended to arrive at it correctly. She stopped before him. Up close in the full outdoor light, Jun-hyuk could see things in her face that the fish counter had hidden. The tiredness behind the composure. The precision of someone who had been holding something very heavy for a very long time and had learned to make it look like stillness. He could also see, less expected and more piercing, that she was proud of him. Not the arranged, ceremonial pride of royal approval. The real kind. The kind that arrives without warning and sits in the eyes before the person can decide whether to let it. You handled that correctly, she said. Mercy told me to consider before answering. He glanced sideways. Even when I already know the answer. The dowager looked at Mercy. Mercy looked back at her with the steady eyes that held things without spilling them. Your name, the dowager said. Mercy Osemensa. How old are you, Mercy Osemensa? 8. The dowager opened her ivory fan, studied the painted cranes for a moment, closed it again with a clean, precise snap. In my experience, she said, and her voice had shed something, some formal outer layer that the fish counter and the palace protocols and the 4 months of careful survival had required of it. The most dangerous people in any negotiation are the ones nobody thought to include in the briefing. She looked at Mercy fully. They did not include you in the briefing. No, Mercy agreed. Good. The dowager inclined her head. The same gesture she had given her grandson, a recognition, not a bow. Keep it that way. Mercy placed her right hand over her heart and returned the gesture with a gravity that made him Tae-won, watching from the entrance, press 2 fingers to his mouth and look at the sky for a moment. The council convened on the boundary wall with the document open across Min-sol's knees, every child leaning in at the angle of people studying something that matters, the afternoon sun moving the shadows slowly around them. It says he must appear before the full council, Min-sol reported, running a finger beneath each line with the focused care of someone who had taught himself to read documents by reading everything he could find. In formal royal attire, with a designated representative of the House of Seo. That means the dowager, Yui said from the front row, yellow dress still pristine, navy collar unwrinkled. Or Kwon-dae sung, Kang-dae offered. Or both. Min-sol looked up. It does not specify a limit on representatives. Jun-hyuk was quiet, the crown on his head moving slightly in a breath of wind, the dried sunflowers holding. He was looking at the document without reading it, looking through it at something beyond it that only he could locate. What are you thinking? Mercy asked. He was quiet for another moment. Then, I am thinking that a presentation is not the same as a return. They want me visible. They want me presented. He looked at her. But visible on whose terms? Mercy considered this the way she considered everything. Fully, without rushing, without performing the consideration for anyone watching. Yours, she said finally. It has to be yours. Or it means nothing. They will have conditions. Everyone has conditions. She straightened the already straight sash of her amber dress with both hands. The question is whether your conditions are louder than theirs. Min-sol looked between them with the expression of someone watching a conversation move faster than his pen, and had decided to simply absorb it instead. The gold star badge on his mustard blazer caught the afternoon light. So we go, Jun-hyuk said. Not a question. We go, Mercy confirmed. Kang-dae raised his hand. When you say we, the council accompanies His Highness to the presentation, Mercy said, with a completeness that left no space for negotiation. The car park absorbed this. Kang-dae lowered his hand, nodded once with the resolve of a person who has made peace with escalators being a possibility, and has decided that loyalty is larger than fear. Kwon-dae Sung found Im Tae-won in the back corridor 20 minutes later. Im Tae-won was leaning against the wall beside the narrow window, jacket still perfect, pocket square still correct, eyes closed in the manner of a man taking 30 seconds to be somewhere else entirely before returning to a situation that required his full attention. She wants to say yes, Kwon Dae-sung said without preamble. I know. Tae-won opened his eyes. She told me. She also told me she intends to build a trap while they look for one. Kwon Dae-sung was quiet for a moment. She has been planning this since before the photograph. Longer. Tae-won straightened from the wall. I think she has been planning this since the day we arrived. He adjusted his pocket square. Actually adjusted it this time, the genuine version rather than the reflexive one. The fish counter was not exile, Dae-sung. It was positioning. Kwon Dae-sung looked at the narrow window. Outside in the car park, the afternoon light had moved across the boundary wall where 12 children sat in 2 deliberate rows around a boy in a supermarket uniform and a handmade crown, beside a girl in an amber dress who was currently pointing at something in a document while Min Sol wrote and Yui nodded and Kang Dae sat up straighter than he had sat all morning. Something moved across Kwon Dae-sung's face. Through it briefly like weather. The council is expecting a frightened boy, he said. Yes. They are going to get something considerably different. Yes. Tae-won picked up his walkie-talkie from the counter beside him. Because of her. He did not specify which her. He did not need to. There were 2 of them, 61 years apart, one with an ivory fan and one with gold hair clasps, and between them they had rebuilt a kingdom in a supermarket car park without a single person noticing until it was already standing. Kwon Dae-sung straightened his burgundy tie. Both cufflinks. The full ritual. We have 72 hours. We have 72 hours, Tae-won confirmed. They stood side by side in the corridor, 2 men in charcoal suits looking through a narrow window at the future being organized by children, and neither of them said another word because sometimes the most powerful thing available is simply to recognize what is already happening and get out of its way. In the car park, as the afternoon settled warm and unhurried around the boundary wall, Mercy leaned toward Junhyuk and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. Are you still frightened? He thought about it honestly, the way she had taught him to think about things all the way through, not stopping at the comfortable surface. Yes, he said. But it knows where to stand now. Mercy looked at him for a moment. Then she looked forward, at the supermarket building and the street beyond it and the city beyond that, and everything beyond the city that was coming toward them in 72 hours whether they were ready or not. Good, she said softly. That is what we needed. The crown caught the afternoon sun one final time before the light shifted. Gold ribbon blazing, dried sunflowers holding, white baby's breath steady at the front. 12 children waited on a boundary wall in 2 deliberate rows. Snacks finished, juice boxes folded, faces forward. The House of Seo had 72 hours. And the Prime Minister of Aisle 3 had already started counting. The argument began, as the most consequential arguments always do, over something that appeared small. Specifically, it began over shoes. Dowager Seo Hairan was seated in the Supermart staff room, a space that had never previously hosted anything more significant than a birthday cake and 2 resignation letters, in a high-back chair that Tae-won had sourced from the manager's office and positioned near the window with the instinctive spatial awareness of a man who understood that where a person sat communicated everything about who they were before they opened their mouths. She was holding a photograph. Not the viral one, a different photograph, older, edges slightly worn at the corners, the kind carried in a wallet or a document sleeve for long enough that the paper had learned the shape of the thing holding it. In it, a boy of perhaps 7 stood in full royal hanbok beside a woman of perhaps 57, both of them looking at the camera with the specific expression of people who had been told to look natural and had interpreted that instruction formally. The boy in the photograph was Junhyuk. The woman was the dowager, 4 years and 1 collapsed dynasty ago. She studied it for a moment longer than she intended to. Then she placed it face down on the table beside her with a precision that closed the moment without dismissing it, and returned her attention to the matter of the shoes. Those, she said, indicating the pair Tae-won had placed before her on a cloth, traditional Korean court shoes, silk-covered, deep navy with gold embroidery at the toe, are incorrect. Tae-won looked at the shoes. He had spent 4 hours sourcing them. They are authentic royal court. They are the shoes of a boy being presented. The dowager's voice was not unkind. It was, however, absolute. I need the shoes of a boy who is arriving. She looked up at him. There is a considerable difference, Tae-won. One walks toward a judgment. The other walks into a room he already owns. Tae-won picked up the shoes. Set them down again. I will make calls. You will make the right calls. She smoothed the front of her morning outfit. A structured silk jacket the color of warm ivory, mandarin collar, 3/4 sleeves with a single line of pearl buttons from wrist to elbow, paired with wide ivory trousers that fell with the kind of weight that only genuine silk produces. Pearl earrings larger than yesterday's. Her silver hair had been set by someone. Tae-won had arranged it at 6 a.m. without being asked, which she had acknowledged with a single nod that contained everything a longer acknowledgement would have cheapened. She looked, seated in a supermart staff room on a Tuesday morning with 71 hours remaining, exactly like what she was. Tae-won had always found that simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. He picked up the shoes, tucked them under his arm, straightened his jacket, a deep slate three-piece today, pockets square the color of aged gold, cufflinks shaped like small rectangles of onyx, and went to make the right calls. Mercy arrived at Supermart at precisely 7 a.m. This was unusual only in that she had clearly come from somewhere that required a different outfit than yesterday, which meant she had gone home, slept, and returned having given the matter of her appearance for the day serious consideration. She was wearing a deep burgundy dress, structured at the shoulders with a wide square neckline trimmed in gold thread, a fitted bodice and a skirt that reached her knees in a single clean line. Her braids had been freshly redone overnight, longer than yesterday, pinned at the crown of her head with a gold comb that had clearly belonged to someone older and had been entrusted to her for exactly this kind of occasion. White gloves short at her wrists, black shoes with a small gold buckle. She walked through the automatic doors with the document from Director Shin in a clear sleeve under her arm, and found Junhyuk already in aisle 3. He was not restocking. He was standing at the end of the aisle in his Supermart uniform, staring at the ramen shelf without seeing it, his hands in his pockets, the handmade crown sitting on the staff room table where he had placed it carefully before his shift technically began. He had not slept particularly well. This was visible in the set of his shoulders. Not collapsed, never collapsed, but carrying something overnight that daylight had not yet helped him put down. Mercy stopped beside him, looked at the ramen shelf, looked at him. "You were thinking all night," she said. Not a question. "I was." He looked at her sideways, registered the burgundy dress and the gold comb and the white gloves and said nothing about any of it because something in his chest understood that this was Mercy in her version of armor, and it deserved to be taken seriously rather than remarked upon. "What conclusions did you reach?" He was quiet for a moment. "That I am not afraid of the council." He paused. "I am afraid of what I become if I walk into that room the way they expect me to walk in." Mercy turned to look at him fully. "Explain that." "If I arrive as a boy being restored." He stopped, searched for the precise language. "Then I am theirs. Their project. Their recovered asset. The crown prince they rescued from a supermarket." His jaw tightened slightly. "But if I arrive as myself, then you are nobody's project," Mercy finished. Yes. She thought about this for the length of time it deserved. Outside the aisle, the supermarket was beginning its morning. The soft percussion of trolleys, the first announcements, the particular quality of light that belonged to a place opening itself to the day. "My grandmother," Mercy said eventually, "has a saying. She says a river does not ask the bank for permission to move." She looked at the ramen shelf as though addressing it. "It simply moves. And the bank rearranges itself accordingly." Junhyuk absorbed this. "Your grandmother has a saying for everything. She has lived a long time." Mercy adjusted her gold comb with one white-gloved hand, long enough to know that the people who ask for permission rarely get the thing they were actually after. And the people who simply move, she looked at him. They get the river. From somewhere deeper in the store, the sound of small deliberate footsteps announced Min-sol's arrival before he appeared at the mouth of aisle 3 in a deep forest green blazer with brass buttons, a white shirt, dark trousers with a clean press, and his blue notebook already open. He looked at Mercy. He looked at Junhyuk. He looked at the ramen shelf as though trying to identify its role in the conversation. "The others are here," he said. "Kongdae is already arguing with the escalator." "The escalator is not doing anything," Junhyuk said. "I know. He is arguing preemptively." Min-sol uncapped his pen. "Should I record that?" "No," Mercy and Junhyuk said simultaneously. The staff room had been transformed by 9 a.m. Not decorated. The dowager had been clear on that point when Tae-won had briefly suggested it. Decoration was for celebrations. This was a strategy session and required the visual language of a strategy session, which meant a clean table, ordered chairs, relevant documents, and no bunting of any kind. What it had instead was the council. All 8 of them, Mercy, Min-sol, Yui, Kangdae, the girl in the green pinafore whose name was revealed today to be Song Jun, and 3 other children from the boundary wall whose names Min-sol had formally recorded in his blue notebook at Mercy's instruction on Tuesday, seated around the staff room table in what was objectively the most elegantly dressed emergency meeting a Supermart staff room had ever hosted. Jun had exchanged the green pinafore for a deep teal dress with a white Peter Pan collar and small pearl buttons down the front, her hair in 2 neat braids with teal ribbons at each end. Yui sat in a crisp white blouse beneath a navy pinafore dress, her collar pin a small gold star that matched Min-sol's badge with a coordination that suggested either planning or the particular harmony of children who spend enough time together to begin mirroring each other unconsciously. Kangdae had arrived in a burgundy turtleneck beneath a camel blazer that his mother had clearly ironed with the focus of a woman who understood that her son was attending something important even if she did not know precisely what. He sat as far from the door as possible, which placed him nearest the window, which he had checked twice for escalator proximity and found satisfactory. At the head of the table, Junhyuk sat in a fresh outfit that Tae-won had produced from a garment bag at 8 a.m. without explanation, dark charcoal trousers with a perfect press, a white collarless shirt beneath a structured deep navy jacket with subtle gold embroidery at the collar, and shoes that were not the incorrect ones and were not yet the correct ones but were, Tae-won had assured him, temporary and adequate. The handmade crown sat in the center of the table. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had suggested moving it. To Junhyuk's left, Mercy sat with the director's document open before her and a second document beside it, a list she had written herself in her clearest handwriting on Supermart notepaper, which she had not shown anyone yet. At the far end of the table, in the high-back chair, Dowager Seo Hyran presided in her warm ivory silk with her pearl earrings and her fan closed on the table beside her right hand. She had looked at the children when they filed in and said nothing. But something in her face had shifted, the same involuntary recognition that Director Shin had experienced in the car park, except that on the Dowager it resolved into something specific and deliberate rather than simply landing and passing. These children, her expression said, are not an audience. She had adjusted her understanding accordingly. Tae-won stood near the door in his slate 3-piece and aged gold pocket square, a leather document folder under his arm, looking marginally less like a man at the edge of professional collapse than he had at any point in the previous 48 hours. The 72-hour window, Mercy began without preamble, began yesterday morning. We have approximately 63 hours remaining. She looked around the table. We need to discuss 3 things. First, what His Highness wears to the presentation. Second, who stands beside him and where. Third, she paused and the pause had weight. What we know about Councilman Yo. The staff room registered this. Tae-won's leather folder moved slightly under his arm. The Dowager's right hand rested on the closed fan. Junhyuk looked at Mercy with an expression that asked, quietly, how long she had been thinking about Councilman Yeo. Her expression answered, long enough. The dissenting vote, Min-sol said, pen moving. You think it matters? A dissent in a unanimous body is never accidental, Mercy said. It is a message. The question is who it was sent to. She looked at the Dowager. Your Grace, do you know Councilman Yeo? Every adult in the room experienced a version of the same internal response to an 8-year-old deploying the correct formal address without being instructed, without hesitation, and without apparent awareness that it was remarkable. The Dowager's expression confirmed that Mercy had both the right address and the right instinct. I know him well, the Dowager said. He served under my husband for 11 years. He voted against the dissolution that removed Junhyuk from succession. Her eyes moved to her grandson briefly, then returned to Mercy. He is not our enemy. No. Mercy looked at her list on the Supermart notepaper. I think he is our door. Kwon Dae-sung entered the staff room at that moment, which was convenient because it gave everyone a reason to pause and absorb what had just been said. He was wearing a 3-piece suit in a deep charcoal so dark it read almost black, a tie the color of old bronze, pocket square matching with a precision that suggested they had been selected together rather than paired after the fact. His cufflinks today were gold, simple, heavy, the kind that do not need to announce anything. He pulled out the chair beside Tae-won and sat without speaking, because he was a man who knew when a room was already moving correctly and understood that the correct contribution to a moving room was momentum, not interruption. He looked at Mercy's notepaper list. Then he looked at her. You want to contact Yeo before the presentation, he said. Yes. He will be watched. I know. Mercy smoothed one white-gloved hand across the supermart notepaper with the focused calm of someone who has already solved the problem they are describing. Which is why we are not going to contact him. She looked around the table, at the dowager, at Kwon Dae-sung, at Im Tae-won, at Jun-hyuk, at 8 children in their finest outfits seated around a staff room table with the full attention of people who understand that what happens in this room will determine what happens in that council chamber. We are going to let him contact us. Kang Dae raised his hand from his position near the window. Mercy looked at him. How? He asked. Mercy reached into the clear sleeve beside the director's document and produced a second, smaller piece of paper. She placed it on the table and slid it to the center, where the handmade crown sat with its gold ribbon and dried sunflowers, still carrying everything Tuesday had placed in it. On the paper, in a handwriting that was not Mercy's, were 12 words. Kwon Dae-sung read them first. Something moved across his face. Im Tae-won leaned forward. Read them. Sat back. Pressed 2 fingers to his mouth. The dowager did not lean forward. She simply looked at Mercy with the measured attention of a woman recalibrating her understanding of something for the second time in 2 days. Jun-hyuk read the 12 words last. He looked up at Mercy. When did this arrive? This morning, she said. Under the door of my mother's flower shop. Before 6 a.m. Yeo sent this? Someone sent it on his behalf. Mercy folded her white-gloved hands on the table. Which means he knows we are here. Which means he has been watching since before the photograph. She paused. Which means the descent was not just a message to us. It was a warning, Jun-hyuk said quietly. Yes. Mercy looked at the 12 words in the center of the table beside the crown. Someone on that council does not want you presented. And it is not Councilman Yeo. The staff room held this. Outside, Supermart continued its morning with the ordinary dedication of a place that did not know it was also simultaneously the temporary headquarters of a royal restoration that had 62 hours and 40 minutes left on its clock. Kangdi's hand was still raised. You can put your hand down, Mercy told him. I have a follow-up question, he said. Ask it. He looked at the 12 words in the center of the table. Then at Mercy. Then at Jun-hyuk. Then back at Mercy with the expression of someone who has decided that loyalty requires asking the difficult thing even when the difficult thing is, well, difficult. Are we in danger now? The staff room waited. Mercy looked at Jun-hyuk. Jun-hyuk looked at Kang Dae with the full, honest attention he had given him in the car park on Tuesday. No diplomatic softening, no arranged composure. Yes, he said. Kang Dae nodded slowly. Okay. He lowered his hand. I am still here though. And the crown on the table caught the staff room light along every gold ribbon edge, dried sunflowers holding white baby's breath steady, waiting for the head it belonged on and the room it was built for. The 12 words on the paper read, the 7th seat has been sold. Do not let them dress the boy. Nobody spoke for a full 30 seconds after Jun-hyuk read them aloud. The staff room processed the sentence the way a body processes a sudden drop in temperature. Not with panic, but with the immediate, involuntary redistribution of everything toward the center where the warmth still lived. Min-sol's pen had stopped moving entirely. Yui sat with her hands flat on the table, navy pinafore perfectly pressed. Her expression the particular stillness of a child who has just upgraded her threat assessment and is reorganizing accordingly. Jun's pearl buttons caught the light as she straightened in her teal dress without being told to. Kwon Dae-sung spoke first. The 7th seat. His voice was the voice he used when information required immediate architectural response. Flat, precise, stripped of everything decorative. The council has 7 members. Director Shin represents the 1st seat. The chair. He looked at the dowager. Which seat is Yeo's? The 4th, the dowager said. Her ivory silk jacket was perfectly still around her. The 7th seat belongs to Chairman Baek Min-jun. The name landed differently on different people. Im Tae-won's aged gold pocket square moved as he exhaled. Kwon Dae-sung's bronze tie did not move at all because he did not exhale. He simply absorbed the name with the focused stillness of a man cataloging a threat and cross-referencing it against everything he already knew. Jun-hyuk looked at his grandmother. Baek Min-jun was at the dissolution. He called the vote, she said. Then he has already done this once. Jun-hyuk's voice was quiet and completely level. And now his seat has been sold. To whom? The dowager's right hand found the ivory fan on the table. She did not open it. She simply held it, the painted cranes hidden inside the closed panels, as though drawing something from the contact. That is what we need Yeo to tell us. Can we reach him? Im Tae-won addressed Kwon Dae-sung directly, the leather folder open now across his knee, pen moving across a fresh page in the quick, compressed handwriting of someone capturing structure rather than narrative. Not directly. Kwon Dae-sung's gold cufflinks caught the overhead light as he placed both hands on the table. Yeo's movements will be documented from the moment that summons was issued. Every call, every visit, every deviation from routine. Beck's people are thorough. Then we do not reach Yeo, Mercy said. Every head turned toward her. She was looking at the 12 words in the center of the table with the focused patience of someone waiting for a thing to finish arriving. Then she looked up. Yeo reached us. Through my mother's flower shop. She paused. My mother delivers flowers to 14 addresses in this neighborhood every week. She has done it for 6 years. It is the most ordinary, invisible route in a 4-block radius. She looked at Kwon Dae-sung. Nobody watching Yeo would think twice about a flower delivery. Kwon Dae-sung studied her across the table with an expression that was not quite what it would have been 2 days ago. Something in it had shifted. The recalibration that happens when a person you have categorized incorrectly keeps revealing the error of that categorization until the category itself becomes untenable. Your mother knows about this? He asked. My mother knows that I needed to borrow her delivery schedule. Mercy adjusted her gold comb with one white-gloved hand. She asked one question. Which was, is my daughter doing something important? Mercy's expression carried the private warmth of someone recounting a conversation that belongs, mostly, to them. I told her yes. She gave me the schedule. Im Tae-won pressed 2 fingers to his mouth again. It was becoming his signature gesture for moments when he found himself genuinely moved by something, and had not allocated space for it. The flower shop plan was agreed upon in 11 minutes, which was fast even by the council's standards. Mercy's mother, Mrs. Adwoa Ose-Mensah, whose flower shop occupied the narrow premises between a dry cleaning establishment and a stationery supplier 2 streets from Supermart, had built her delivery routes with the methodical geography of a woman who understood that consistency was its own kind of power. Nobody questioned the flower van. Nobody had ever questioned the flower van. It was as much a part of the neighborhood's daily architecture as the morning light. What nobody outside the staff room knew was that Mercy had, at 5:47 a.m. that morning, already drafted a note in her clearest handwriting, sealed it inside a small envelope, and placed it among the stems of a white orchid arrangement scheduled for delivery to a government building on the north side of the city. The government building where Councilman Yeo kept his secondary office. You did this before the meeting, Junhyuk said. It was not an accusation. It carried, if anything, a quiet amazement. I did it before I came here. Mercy smoothed the front of her burgundy dress. The note needed to travel with the 7 a.m. delivery. The meeting started at 9 a.m. The sequence required that order. Kang Dae turned to the boy beside him, one of the 3 whose names Min-sol had formally recorded, and whispered at a volume that served no actual whisper function. She planned all of this before breakfast. I heard that, Mercy said. I know, Kang Dae said. I wanted you to. Kwon Dae-sung left the staff room at 10 a.m. and did not return for 2 hours. When he did, he was carrying information in a garment bag. He placed the garment bag on the table without explanation and looked at Junhyuk. Stand up. Junhyuk stood. Kwon Dae-sung unzipped the garment bag. The staff room went quiet in a different way than it had gone quiet over the 12 words. This was not the quiet of threat assessment but of something rarer and more disarming. The quiet of beauty arriving unexpectedly in a functional space. Inside the bag was a royal hanbok of a depth and quality that had no business existing inside a Supermart staff room. The geoggery was deep midnight blue, not navy, not charcoal, but the specific blue that exists at the furthest point of a clear sky before it becomes something else entirely, with gold embroidery at the collar and cuffs rendered in a pattern that Im Tae-won recognized immediately and visibly stopped breathing upon recognizing. The pattern was the House of Seo crest. Not a reproduction. Not an approximation. The actual crest, worked in genuine gold thread with the precision of hands that had done it before, on garments that had mattered before, for occasions that had carried the full weight of a dynasty before it fell. The baji trousers were the same midnight blue, pressed with a line so clean it appeared architectural. A decorative diengi ribbon in deep gold lay folded at the bottom of the bag, and at the very base wrapped in separate cloth shoes. Not the incorrect ones. Not the temporary adequate ones. The correct ones. Silk-covered, deep midnight blue. Gold embroidery at the toe continuing the crest pattern from the geoggery, with the seamless intention of a garment conceived as a complete world, rather than assembled from parts. Where, Imtaewon said, and his voice had lost its usual operational smoothness, did you find these? Kwon Dae-sung looked at the dowager. The dowager looked at the hanbok. Something crossed her face that she did not attempt to manage or contain. It arrived, it moved through her, it settled. And what remained after it settled was a composure that was not the absence of feeling but feeling that had been fully inhabited and then stood up inside of. I had them made, she said quietly, 8 months before the dissolution, against the possibility that we would need them again. She looked at her grandson. I brought them here in a trunk with the fish counter supplies. I have been waiting for the correct occasion. The staff room held this. Jun-hyuk looked at his grandmother across the table, across the garment bag, across 4 months of mackerel and wrong names and handmade crowns and car park councils, and something moved through him that had no formal language but did not need any. A presentation, he said carefully, is not the correct occasion. No, the dowager agreed. Her ivory sleeve caught the light as she reached forward and touched the gold embroidery at the collar of the jiagari. Briefly, precisely. The way you touch something you have been keeping for someone. An arrival is. Mercy's note reached Councilman Yeo at 11:23 a.m. She knew this because Yui, who had been stationed near the flower shop's delivery tracking system on her borrowed phone since 10 a.m., sent a single message to Min-sol's notebook via a folded paper relay that had become the council's preferred internal communication method, which Min-sol read aloud in 4 words. Orchid has been received. Mercy looked at Jun-hyuk across the table. He looked back at her with the expression of someone standing at the edge of something large, feeling the full dimension of it, choosing to step forward anyway. Now we wait, she said. I am not good at waiting, Kang-dae offered from his position near the window. Practice, Mercy told him. For how long? Until it stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like preparation. Kang-dae considered this philosophical reframing with visible effort. Is there a difference? Yes, Jun-hyuk said. Waiting is passive. Preparation knows what it is waiting for. Kang-dae looked between the two of them with an expression that suggested he was spending considerable time in the company of people who made him feel both inspired and slightly exhausted. He turned back to the window, folded his hands in his lap with the resolve of a person practicing. The response from Councilman Yeo arrived at 2:15 p.m. Not through the flower shop. Not through any route that Kwon Dae-sung's people had been monitoring, which said something significant about Yeo's own operational awareness and the depth of his preparation. It arrived through Supermart's public address system. Specifically, it arrived in the form of an elderly man in a beautifully cut charcoal linen suit and a pale yellow tie who walked through the automatic doors at 2:14 p.m., proceeded directly to the customer service counter, and asked Imtaewon, who was standing there in his slate 3-piece and aged gold pocket square with the expression of a man who had been standing at this counter for 4 months and was prepared for most things but apparently not this, whether he might use the store's public announcement system to locate a specific item. Imtaewon stared at him. The man looked back with the patient eyes of someone in his late 60s, who had spent a career navigating rooms full of people who were staring at him and had made his peace with it. Councilman, Imtaewon said very quietly. Just a customer, Yeo said equally quietly. Looking for a specific item in aisle 3. Imtaewon looked at the public address microphone on the counter. He looked at Yeo. He looked at the microphone again. I will need your item description, he said finally, with the careful neutrality of a man who has decided that the situation is already extraordinary enough that procedural normalcy is the only available anchor. Yeo leaned forward slightly and spoke 4 words. Imtaewon picked up the microphone, cleared his throat. His voice traveled through every speaker in the building with the practiced calm of a man who had announced fruit specials and closing times and lost children for 4 months, and was now announcing something considerably more significant in the same measured tone. Attention Supermart customers. A gentleman at the service counter is looking for. He paused for precisely 1 second. The crown of aisle 3. If you know its location, please come to the front. In the staff room, Mercy stood up. In aisle 3, 3 stock assistants looked at each other. Outside in the car park, Kang-dae, who had been practicing patience near the boundary wall, stood up so fast he knocked over his juice box, caught it, looked at it, put it down and walked inside with the focused determination of someone who had stopped practicing and started arriving. And in the staff room, Jun-hyuk lifted the handmade crown from the center of the table. Gold ribbon, dried sunflowers, white baby's breath, and held it in both hands for a moment. Then he placed it on his head, stood up straight, looked at Mercy. I think, he said. That we have a visitor. Mercy smoothed the front of her burgundy dress, adjusted the gold comb in her freshly pinned braids, pulled her white gloves to her wrists, and moved to his left side, one step behind, the placement so instinctive by now that neither of them noticed it had become the grammar of how they moved through the world together. Then let us not keep him waiting, she said. And the crown of aisle 3 walked through the staff room door toward whatever Councilman Yeo had come to say, with the Prime Minister of aisle 3 beside him, and 12 hours removed from what was already becoming the most significant arrival in the House of Seo's recent history. Behind them, the Dowager rose from her high-backed chair in her warm ivory silk, pearl earrings catching the light, ivory fan opening with a single clean sweep of her wrist. She followed at exactly the right distance. Not too close. Not too far. The distance of a woman who had built this moment across 4 months and a fish counter and a dynasty's worth of patience, and intended to watch it unfold from exactly the correct position. You just watched The Little King of Aisle 3, an Afro-Korean story by Black Silk Stories, where every episode earns the next one. If this story is living in your chest, subscribe, drop a comment telling us what those 12 words mean to you. Share this with someone who needs a world like this one, and do not move. Part 3 is coming, and Councilman Yeo has information that will change everything. The House of Seo does not stop here. Black Silk Stories never does.